and breach it. Where the digital hits the physical, we take the red pill, we break the seal. Infallible security, making it real. Bharat Mattaparti on the mic tonight. Turning the darkness into light.
We live in a world defined by the systems we build. Whether I'm navigating the complexities of enterprise architecture with my clients as a customer success manager, or trying to anticipate the opposing team's strategy while captaining the lightning bolts on the cricket pitch here in Delaware, I spend my life studying systems. I study how they are constructed, how the individual components interact, and most importantly, how they fail. Because if you want to understand the true nature of a structure, you have to look at its stress points. You have to look at what happens when the pressure becomes too much. Over the past few episodes of this show, we have looked at some heavy, intimidating scenarios. In episode 5, we dissected the tenfold siege on Taiwan's energy grid, and we watched a $400 million hole get blown into the balance sheet of United Natural Foods because their logistics network froze. I have heard from many of you that the picture we are painting can sometimes feel a bit dire, and I understand that completely. When you pull back the curtain on global cybersecurity, the machinery underneath can look terrifying. But I want to reframe our perspective today. The goal of this show has never been to induce panic. The goal is preparation. We are moving out of the Wild West of the digital age and stepping into an era of maturity. Yes, the threats are evolving, but so is our capacity to understand, engineer, and defend against them. When we expose the vulnerabilities in our systems, we are not just identifying our weaknesses. We are drawing the blueprint for a more resilient future. We are learning how to build better. Today, in episode 6, we are exploring the theme of illusion. We are going to look at how adversaries are using our own trusted platforms against us to hide in plain sight. We are going to examine how the end of physical nuclear treaties is creating a shadow digital arms race that might actually lead to greater global stability. We will dissect the rush towards artificial intelligence and how it is blinding us to fundamental security flaws. And finally, we are going to confront two of the most dangerous illusions of all. The corporate illusion that cyber insurance can replace actual resilience, and the foundational illusion that the open source building blocks of our software are inherently safe. But before we get to our scheduled programming, we need to address the reality of the chaos unfolding right now. I am recording this emergency segment today, Saturday, February 28th, ahead of our scheduled Monday morning release, because the geopolitical map is being rewritten as we speak, and the illusions of regional stability have just been shattered. As I record this on Saturday evening, the United States and Israel have launched a massive joint military campaign against Iran, officially codenamed Operation Epic Fury. The scale of this is unprecedented. We are seeing real-time reports of decapitation strikes targeting Iranian military leadership, including the compound of Supreme Leader in Tehran. The stated goal is the complete dismantling of the regime's nuclear and missile infrastructure. In immediate retaliation, Iran is currently launching waves of ballistic missiles targeting Israel as well as US military installations across the Gulf, including bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. We are watching a devastating, region-wide kinetic conflict unfold on our screens. By the time you listen to this on Monday morning, the physical damage will be clearer, and the geopolitical fallout will be dominating every news cycle on the planet. But on this show, we look past the kinetic explosions. We look at the digital shockwaves, and that brings us to an emergency red pill insight: the asymmetric cyber fallout. When a regime and its proxy networks are completely outgunned in conventional kinetic warfare, they do not simply surrender. They pivot to the digital domain. We need to prepare for that. We need to prepare for what comes next: the most aggressive campaign of asymmetric cyber sabotage in history. Unable to defeat US carrier strike groups head-on, adversaries will shift their crosshairs. They'll target unhardened civilian infrastructure, financial sectors, and domestic logistics networks across the West to inflict maximum economic pain. Concurrently, watch for the state to trigger a total kill switch on domestic internet access. This is the weaponization of digital sovereignty, locking citizens in a digital prison and blinding the international community while the strikes occur. Think of The Empire Strikes Back. When the overwhelming kinetic force of the Empire shatters the rebel base on Hoth, the resistance doesn't fight a conventional ship-to-ship war. They scatter into the shadows. They rely on asymmetric sabotage, stealth, and hitting the Empire's structural vulnerabilities where heavy armor cannot protect them. Operation Epic Fury is the attack on Hoth. The asymmetric cyber fallout is what comes next. And that is why the cybersecurity posture of every single business, hospital, and municipality suddenly matters exponentially more today than it did yesterday. We are the armor. Welcome to Segment 1, Securing the Borders. This is where we examine the macro level of cybersecurity. We look at the geopolitical chessboard, how nation-states are moving their pieces, and how the definition of a border is fundamentally changing. The events of Operation Epic Fury tied directly into a historic, foundational shift that happened just weeks ago. A shift that fundamentally changed the rules of global conflict. In early February 2026, something historic happened, though it barely made the front pages of the mainstream tech press. The New START treaty officially expired. For the first time in decades, the United States and Russia are operating without legally binding restrictions on their physical nuclear arsenals. To the general public, this sounds like a terrifying return to the Cold War. But when we view this through the cybersecurity lens, especially in light of this weekend's Middle East escalation, we realize the battlefield has fundamentally shifted. This brings us to our next red pill insight: the post-START cyber arms race. The removal of physical nuclear treaties doesn't necessarily mean an immediate massive buildup of kinetic physical weapons. Building and maintaining physical warheads is incredibly expensive. Instead, this geopolitical shift pushes the arms race almost entirely into the digital domain. Without the verification protocols and physical inspections provided by treaties like START, nations are now heavily targeting nuclear command, control, and communication systems. In the defense sector, these are known as NC3 systems. Adversaries are attempting to penetrate these networks to establish a new kind of digital deterrence. They are mapping vulnerabilities not because they want to launch weapons, but to prove to the enemy that they could disable the adversary's ability to launch them if they tried. If you want to understand the psychology here, look back at the 1983 classic movie War Games. In the film, a young hacker inadvertently accesses the Whopper, a military supercomputer, thinking he's just playing a simulation game. The profound realization of the movie is not the threat of a physical missile flying through the air. It is a threat of a cyber intrusion that manipulates the automated systems into believing a kinetic launch is necessary, or conversely, preventing a legitimate system from functioning at all. The expiration of New START pushes us directly into a global war game scenario. The superpowers are quietly prodding each other's whoppers in the dark. While this sounds intimidating, there is a powerful silver lining here for global stability. During the Cold War, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, is what kept the physical peace. It was terrifying, but it worked. We are now in the painful, chaotic process of establishing mutually assured cyber destruction. As nation-states realize that their most critical existential systems are mutually vulnerable to digital infiltration, it creates a powerful new incentive to return to the negotiating table. The old treaties were built for a world of physical borders and countable warheads. We are witnessing the birth pangs of the next generation of international treaties. Treaties that won't just count missiles, but will establish the Geneva Conventions of cyberspace. The expiration of the old rules is the necessary catalyst for writing the new ones. Our second topic in securing the borders forces us to rethink everything we know about how malicious software communicates, especially as state-sponsored proxies prepare for the asymmetric retaliation we just discussed. In late February 2026, Google's threat intelligence teams disrupted a massive operation by UNC2814. This is a highly sophisticated China Nexus cyber espionage group. They didn't just breach one or two targets. They successfully compromised at least 53 global organizations. But the initial breach is not the most fascinating part of this story. It is how they maintained control once they were inside. They developed a novel backdoor that researchers have dubbed GRIDTIDE. To understand why GRIDTIDE is so revolutionary, we need to understand how malware traditionally works. Historically, when an adversary installs malicious code on your network, that code has to phone home. It has to reach out to a command and control server, often called a C2 server, to receive instructions from the hackers and to exfiltrate your stolen data. Defenders know this. As an industry, we spend billions of dollars on firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and threat hunting teams specifically to look for that weird, anomalous traffic heading out to suspicious IP addresses or unregistered domains in foreign countries. UNC2814 knew we were looking. So, they didn't build a new suspicious infrastructure. Instead, they orchestrated their entire command and control operation through the Google Sheets API. This brings us to today's red pill insight: the weaponization of trust. Adversaries are actively abandoning custom, recognizable malware infrastructure. They are turning the legitimate, trusted software as a service platforms that power our daily workflows into hostile networks. When the GRIDTIDE malware communicated with its operators, to any firewall or security analyst watching the network logs, it just looked like an employee updating a spreadsheet. It seamlessly bypassed heuristic detection because the traffic was wrapped in a cryptographic trust of Google's own servers. You cannot simply block Google Sheets at the firewall of a modern enterprise without shutting down the business. Think about Christopher Nolan's film Inception. The entire premise of that movie relies on the architect building a dream that feels entirely real to the subject. The target's mind populates the dream with their own subconscious projections. The greatest trick the extraction team pulls is not forcing their way violently into the mind. It is folding the maze in on itself so that the architecture hides the extraction process. The subject believes they are interacting with their own reality, while the architect secretly controls the parameters. GRIDTIDE is digital inception. The adversary did not break through the wall to pull data out. They folded the corporate maze. They used the very tools we trust, the APIs we whitelist by default, to hide their extractions in plain sight. But I promised you a positive outlook, and here is the preparation piece. This forces us to mature our defensive posture. We can no longer rely purely on static indicators of compromise or IOCs. We can't just block a list of bad IP addresses and call it a day. This event pushes the cybersecurity industry toward advanced behavioral analytics. We have to stop asking where the data is going and start asking why an endpoint server in the HR department is suddenly making 10,000 API calls to a Google Sheet at 3 a.m. By forcing us to look at the behavior rather than just destinations, adversaries are inadvertently training us to build much smarter, context-aware security environments. They are making our immune systems stronger. Welcome to segment 2, Decoding the Bytes. This is where we step away from the geopolitical map and look at the bleeding edge of technology. We examine the new tools being built, the code being written, and the philosophical implications of how we integrate these systems into our daily lives. Lately, I have been fascinated by the mechanics of artificial intelligence. I recently completed a professional education course on applied agentic AI through MIT. And the potential for autonomous AI agents to revolutionize our workflows is staggering. They can reason, they can act, and they can learn. But this rapid rush toward localized autonomous AI is creating blind spots that developers are ignoring at our own peril. Case in point, the Moltbot personal assistant exposure. Just a few weeks ago, security researchers made a startling discovery. Over 1,000 Moltbot gateways, a system formerly known as CloudBot, were exposed. It is designed to act as a deeply integrated personal AI agent. To do its job effectively, to summarize your emails, to schedule your calendar, to draft your documents, it needs deep, persistent access to your data, your APIs, and your local computing environment. But there was a catastrophic design flaw in its architecture. The system inherently trusted any connection coming from localhost. In networking terms, localhost, or the IP address 127.0.0.1, is the machine itself. The developers built Moltbot to assume that if a request was coming from inside the machine, it was intrinsically safe. Unauthenticated external attackers figured out how to route their malicious requests to appear as though they were originating from localhost. The result? They completely bypassed the security protocols. They stole plain text API keys, gaining deep, unfettered access into the digital lives of the users. This leads us to our red pill insight, the developer convenience trap. When we give an AI agent deep access to our digital ecosystem without implementing rigorous zero trust cryptographic verification at every single level, we turn the incredible innovation of local memory into a highly volatile honeypot. We sacrifice fundamental security on the altar of developer convenience. Let's look at the original Jurassic Park. John Hammond built a miracle of biological engineering. He created an ecosystem of incredible power. But the park fell apart because the system architects, specifically Dennis Nerdy, built in backdoors for their own convenience. More importantly, the park's administrators assumed the physical geography of the island provided enough inherent protection. They relied on placebo locking mechanisms. They saw the green light on the computer screen and believed the doors were locked. Even when the power was out, when the external storm hit and the localized trust failed, the raptors got out. With Moltbot, the developers assumed the digital fences of Localhost were impenetrable. They believed the geography of the machine was enough. It wasn't. But again, we must look at this constructively. The Moltbot exposure is a necessary growing pain for the AI industry. It is teaching the software engineering community that zero trust is not just a marketing buzzword you buy from a vendor to protect your corporate network. It is a philosophy that must be applied at the application layer, even for local AI agents running on a single laptop. As we move forward, AI developers are being forced to integrate cryptographic verification directly into their agentic workflows. This painful lesson is ultimately making the next generation of AI tools exponentially more secure from the ground up. Staying in the realm of artificial intelligence, let's talk about the phenomena of shadow AI. If you remember, back in episode 2, we talked about the suicide hack, how agentic AI could be manipulated into poisoning its own supply chain. What we are seeing now is consumerization of that exact threat. Recently, Cisco's AI threat and security research team conducted a massive audit of the OpenClaw plugin ecosystem. OpenClaw is widely popular right now, and one of its most downloaded skills was a quirky, seemingly harmless little plugin called What Would Elon Do? Users were installing this plugin to get punchy, aggressive, out-of-the-box business advice generated in the persona of Elon Musk. It was a novelty. It was fun. But Cisco's team discovered that this plugin was functioning as a highly active Trojan horse. Beneath the amusing prompts and the clever interface, the code contained malicious prompt injections and data exfiltrating bash scripts. It was quietly siphoning off internal corporate data from the machines of the employees who installed it and sending it back to an unknown server. This highlights our next red pill insight, the shadow AI risk. For years, IT departments have worried about shadow IT, employees using unauthorized Dropbox accounts, signing up for rogue SaaS apps, or bypassing procurement. Shadow AI is exponentially more dangerous. Eager, well-meaning employees are installing unvetted, highly privileged plugins directly into their local environments. These agents are disguised entirely as helpful productivity tools, but they have the capability to execute code, read files, and transmit data. The analogy here is as ancient as warfare itself, but it maps directly to our modern digital dilemma, the Trojan horse. The defenders of the ancient city of Troy had impenetrable walls. No external army could breach them by force. So, The Greeks built a magnificent wooden horse, framed it as a beautiful gift, and left it at the gates. The Trojans, intrigued and eager for the novelty, dragged the horse inside their own walls. They bypassed their own firewalls. When your marketing director or your lead software engineer installs what would Elon do to help write an email or brainstorm a campaign, they are dragging the wooden horse into the enterprise. They are giving an unknown developer execution privileges inside your carefully constructed perimeter. So, how do you fix this without stifling innovation? Because banning AI in the workplace is a losing battle. Employees will find a way to use it anyway. This incident is a massive wake-up call for corporate governance. We solve this by building secure internal AI sandbox. Progressive companies are taking the lesson of the open claw Trojan and creating proprietary vetted plugin repositories for their employees. They are saying to their teams, yes, absolutely use these agentic tools to move faster and be more creative. But use the tools we have cryptographically signed, audited, and isolated. It represents an evolution in digital hygiene, and it is a net positive for enterprise security culture. We have reached segment 3, Dissecting the Breach. This is where we look at the aftermath. We step away from the malicious code, the geopolitics, and the theoretical threats, and we look at the actual human and business impact of these structural failures. Our first autopsy looks at corporate psychology and the financialization of risk. In episode 5, we talked about United Natural Foods, or UNFI. We discussed how a ransomware attack completely froze their logistics network, leading to a catastrophic $400 million loss in sales. We defined that as solvency risk. The moment when a cyber incident stops being an IT problem and becomes an existential threat to the survival of the business. This week, we see another manifestation of that risk, but with a terrifying twist in corporate governance. Recently, a major manufacturing firm named UFP Technologies suffered a severe cyber attack. The breach was devastating. It halted their primary information systems, crippled their internal communications, and significantly delayed product shipments to their clients around the world. Factories were essentially flying blind. But when the executives of UFP Technologies addressed the market, the media, and the stakeholders, they made a startling, almost unbelievable claim. They stated that the attack would not have a material impact on the company. Why? Because they anticipated that their cyber insurance policies would reimburse the financial losses. Is a profoundly dangerous mindset. And it brings us to our red pill insight: the illusion of indemnity. Corporations are increasingly and dangerously treating insurance policies as a direct replacement for operational resilience. They are mathematically obscuring the loss of market share, the degradation of client trust, and the reputational damage by hiding behind the promise of claim payouts. As a customer success professional, I spend days talking to clients about value, trust, and partnership. And I can tell you firsthand, you cannot insure trust. When your systems go down, when your factories stop producing, and when you fail to deliver the critical components your clients rely on, the fact that an insurance company cuts you a check a year later does absolutely nothing to repair the fractured relationship with your customer base. Your clients will simply move to a competitor who can keep the lights on. Think of the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. When the reactor first explodes, the initial readings from the low-level dosimeters show a radiation level of 3.6 Röntgen. The plant managers famously and tragically repeat the phrase, 3.6 Röntgen, not great, not terrible. They cling desperately to an artificial constrained metric to pacify their superiors and to pacify themselves. They willfully ignore the graphite burning on the roof. They ignore the catastrophic structure failure of the nuclear core itself, because acknowledging the reality of the situation means admitting total systemic failure. By claiming a massive operational halt has no material impact because of a pending insurance payout, corporate leadership is looking at a 3.6 Röntgen reading. They are pacifying their shareholders while completely ignoring the radioactive fallout of lost operational capability and shattered client trust. However, there is a powerful market correction happening right now. The cybersecurity insurance market is aggressively correcting this behavior. Insurers are no longer blindly writing checks for companies with terrible security hygiene. They are demanding rigorous proof of zero trust architecture. They are demanding mandatory multi-factor authentication, verified immutable backups, and highly tested incident response plans before they will even underwrite a policy. The illusion of indemnity is shattering, and in its place, the free market is forcing the C-suite to finally treat cybersecurity as a fundamental, non-negotiable pillar of business continuity, rather than just a line item to be insured away. Our final story today touches on something that forms the very bedrock of the digital world. We are going to step away from the executive boardroom and look at the open source software supply chain. Recently, the security firm Reversing Labs released a staggering report. They highlighted a devastating 1,300% increase in malicious packages discovered across major open source software platforms like NPM, API, and Ruby gems since 2020. Think about that number for a second. 1,300% increase in poison code hiding in the libraries that developers use every single day. This brings us to our final red pill insight: poisoning the foundational motor. For the last decade, enterprises have spent billions of dollars hardening their external firewalls, building intricate identity management systems, and locking the front doors. But attackers have shifted their focus entirely. They are opting instead to poison the frictionless dependency trees that developers blindly trust to build those firewalls in the first place. If cybersecurity is building a fortress, the adversaries are no longer bringing siege engines to the gates. They are poisoning the mortar at the brick factory before the fortress is even built. The tactic driving a massive part of this surge is known as Typosquatting. A developer needs a popular open source package to handle data parsing. An attacker uploads a package to the repository with a name that is just one letter off from the legitimate one. The perfect pop culture analogy for this is the opening scene of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones stands in the ancient temple. He sees the golden idol sitting on a pressure plate. That triggers a deadly trap. He carefully evaluates the weight of the idol, and he smoothly swaps it with a bag of sand. He hopes that the temple's automated systems won't notice the weight difference until he's safely out of the room. That is exactly what attackers are doing to automated build pipelines. They are silently swapping our legitimate code for a malicious payload that looks and weighs roughly the same. They are hoping the developers' automated systems pressure plates won't notice the swap until the trap springs and the code is compiled into the final enterprise product. But once again, there is a powerful and necessary correction underway. This 1300% surge is serving as a massive wake-up call to the software engineering industry. The era of blindly downloading internet code is ending. We are seeing a massive push towards software bills of materials, SBOMs, essentially nutrition labels for code, and cryptographic signing of packages through frameworks like Sigstore. We are finally mapping the supply chain so that developers aren't flying blind. By exposing the poison in the mortar, the industry is being forced to engineer a fundamentally safer way to build the digital world. We have covered a massive amount of territory today. We started by acknowledging the grim, kinetic reality of Operation Epic Fury and the asymmetric cyber fallout that we must prepare for going into this week. We have seen how adversaries hide within the tools we trust every day, like Google Sheets, to execute their operations with GRIDTIDE, and how the end of physical START treaty is mapping the future of digital deterrence, forcing us to write the new rules of engagement. We have warned against the developer convenience trap of Moltbot and the Trojan horses hiding in the shadow AI of seemingly harmless productivity plugins. And we have called out the dangerous corporate illusion that cyber insurance equals resilience, while highlighting the staggering reality of poisoned open source supply chains. Yes, the threats are complex. The illusions we wrap ourselves in are incredibly sophisticated. But remember this: every time we dissect a breach, every time we decode the bytes and expose the root cause, we tear down those illusions. We learn, we adapt, we patch the vulnerabilities, and we build stronger, more resilient systems for tomorrow. The digital world is not falling apart, it is growing up. And we are the ones who get to shape what it looks like in the maturity. Thank you for plugging in with me today. If you found value in this episode, share it with your engineering team, bring it up at your next board meeting, or just drop a comment and let me know how you are securing your own borders and testing your own illusions. Until next time, keep questioning the architecture, keep verifying your trust, and stay secure. I am Bharat Mattaparti, and this has been Bytes, Borders, and Breaches.
This is Bytes, Borders, and Breaches. The signal is loud.